You're all misreading why Singaporeans are so mad at Chinese brands, and it's not about racism or xenophobia, it's about the narcissism of small differences. A GB Tuition Center published an analysis post on this recently which turned out to be surprisingly controversial, so let's talk about it. Singaporeans are so mad at the sheer number of Chinese food and beverage brands colonizing Singapore's commercial spaces that they're demanding the government regulate it. Muslim Singaporeans have to watch halal eateries lose ground to chains that don't bother applying for halal certification. And the Mandarin-only menu sends a message that some diners are worth accommodating and others are not. This lands hardest on the communities that Singapore has always promised would never be an afterthought. And yet, none of this happened when Korean and American and Japanese restaurants did roughly the same thing about a decade earlier. Nobody wrote a think piece fearing that Yoshinoya would swallow our national cuisine. But that's because Japan and Korea arrived on our shores on a smaller scale and as exporters of taste, and they were never mistaken for kin, but China arrives sharing almost pretty much the same ancestry. The issue goes, aren't Singaporeans majority Han Chinese anyway? What's the problem with Chinese people consuming Chinese products? The discomfort we feel for these mainland Chinese stores must be some kind of embarrassing self-hatred. You guys need to know that the average Singaporean Chinese and the Chinese executive behind Haidilao are only similar in appearance and are actually different as they. The "we're all Chinese" narrative fails to take into account that the bulk of Chinese migration to Singapore occurred in the early 19th century, and they were mostly Hokkiens, Cantonese, Teochews, Hakkas, and Hainanese. These dialect group descendants were not Mandarin speakers by heritage. Mandarin became dominant in Singapore only after the 1979 Speak Mandarin campaign, which is a top-down government project. On the other hand, the new PRC migrants arriving after the 1990s speak Mandarin as their first language, and they exhibit cultural practices shaped by post-Mao China, such as state nationalism and consumerism. They are very unlike traditional Chinese Singaporeans who are tied to Hokkien and Teochew and Cantonese subgroups. So this means that Singaporean Chinese today are very much detached from the Mandarin-centric PRC version of Chineseness that's now flooding our city-state.